Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of Growing Bolder Now. Yeah, another week has gone by already, and I know, or at least I hope you're ready for another interesting guest with a fascinating story to tell. And that's what you're going to get, but this time it's going to be a little different. This time, instead of the source of the inspiration being the guest is going to do her best to inspire us to take action to help mitigate a problem that really does threaten us all. But first, we want to welcome everybody who's watching us right now on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitch. Remember, we love it when you leave a comment. Let us know where you're watching from and fire off any thoughts that you might have, because that'll help us make this an even more interesting segment where you too have a voice. And in case this is all new to you, Growing Bolder is a company that's out to change the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you perceive age. Yeah, there can be health challenges and lifestyle changes as we get older, but people kind of ignore the fact or forget that it can also be a time of new adventures and a whole new set of opportunities. So do this. Check out growingbolder.com. That's the portal to all things Growing Bolder. You'll learn about our television shows. You can even watch episodes there, our podcast, our amazing magazine, and so much more. In fact, this interview is also going to be part of our radio show. So what do you say that we get going right now? I'm Bill Schaefer, and you're listening to Growing Bolder. Listen, in life, most of us really want to do the right thing. Don't you think? We want to be liked, we want to help others, and we want to be responsible people. But sometimes even the simplest things can be confusing, like, say, okay, here's an example. True confession time. I'm a lousy recycler. I don't want to be, but honestly, I don't get it. And if it's early in the morning on recycling day and I have to think about anything, either I'm going to do it wrong or I'm not going to do it at all. Anybody else out there feel the same way? Well, we're going to clear that up right now, once and for all. So get ready for some clarity and enough understanding that, who knows, you'll probably end up being the neighborhood recycling expert person. And that would make our next guest very happy. She is no less than an unsung American hero who for over a decade has stepped into the fight. From helping create meaningful legislation to having a real understanding of how recycling actually works. In fact, she has an awesome new book out, which is as interesting as it is informative. It's called Can I Recycle This? A Guide to Better Recycling. Let's say hi to Jenny Romer. How are you, Jenny?
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Listen, first of all, honestly, thank you for your passion for getting it and for being able to and taking the time to explain all this to us. The first thing I wanted to ask you, Jenny, is why you? Why did this become your area of expertise?
Well, recycling and the environment has always been something that interested me. My mom took me to the recycling center when I was growing up, and it was kind of a place where we liked to hang out as a family and look through the magazine bin and stuff like that. And then after in law school, I was in San Francisco, and they passed the initial plastic bag ban there. And so I was kind of poised to be in a place where a lot of things were happening. And I volunteered at the Board of Supervisors office and saw that the plastics industry was spending so much money on marketing plastic bags as recyclable and on trying to defeat local laws. So I just decided to throw myself into the fray, and I started a website called plasticbaglaws.org, and I started showing up at meetings and introducing myself as the expert. And now, almost 15 years later, I really am the expert in single-use plastics reduction. And along that way, I just learned so much about recycling and reducing plastics and kind of what policies work. And so I decided to write this book, which is an illustrated book for adults. So it's very pretty and kind of easy to digest, unlike a lot of other policy books out there.
Yeah, the book's amazing. It's colorful. The graphics are easy to see and kind of fun to look at. And I love the color coding that you've used for what things can be recycled and what things can't. But you mentioned such an important thing here that you could have become any kind of an attorney that you wanted to. And I'm sure when people ask you, well, gee, Jenny, what is your area? And you go plastics and recycling, they go, okay, and turn the other way. We're hooked, we're addicted we've got to find a way to kick the habit, that plastic habit. And people laugh or they sigh or they go, "Hey, that's great," but it really is killing us. What is the problem with plastic?
Mhm. Yeah, well, one big thing with plastics and recycling is that people really feel good about putting things into their recycling bin. It's kind of like they didn't use them in the first place. A lot of people feel, and that warm fuzzy feeling we get is not by accident. The plastics industry has spent millions of dollars on marketing recycling as the answer. For decades. And so it's not surprising that people feel this way. But unfortunately, a lot of plastic that is produced isn't actually recyclable. So, plastic means a lot of different things. There are 6 main different types of resins. Some of them are more recyclable than others. Those are kind of the chasing arrow codes in the bottom of your plastic packages. That little triangle with the number in the middle. That's a resin code. And the ones in the twos that are bottles and jugs are really the most recyclable plastic that we have right now. But a lot of the other stuff, like the party cups, those red cups that people buy for parties, that have a number 6 at the bottom, those really are not being recycled at all in the US. So I really want to educate people in my book about kind of what is recyclable, what isn't, and really focusing on reducing the stuff that isn't recyclable as much as possible.
And in your book, from the very beginning, it's almost like a table of contents of lists of items that we would use all the time. Things like plastic carryout bags, straws, paper coffee cups, glass beer bottles, things that we throw in the recycling bin all the time. And it is stunning to see what you have red dots next to, things that we think are recyclable that really are not. What gives?
Yeah. So right now, the plastics or the manufacturers of packaging really have no responsibility for what happens after products leave their hands. So when you buy a bag of chips or a soda bottle, it ends up being the municipality, so your local government or the ratepayer, who pays for the recycling and the waste disposal. And so manufacturers are really just using kind of whatever is the least expensive thing and not really worrying about the recycling part. And so that really just leaves a bunch of really low value garbage that ends up at a lot of local recycling facilities. And so now we're starting to just see some pushback on that, saying, hey, this isn't fair, and pushing for laws. They're called EPR laws for packaging, extended producer responsibility. We already have them for things like paint and batteries. So seeing that for something just like all the packaging that we see on store shelves. So I think that's really going to be a huge change from right now it all being at the municipality and having them have to deal with it. Whereas, years ago, they were actually making money with recycling. So they were baling everything up and shipping it. A lot of it was going to China, where there were, very questionable humanitarian and environmental things going on there. So I think it's good it's not going there anymore, but they were making money. And now a lot of this stuff they're having to pay to have sent to landfill or incineration. And so recycling isn't a money-making thing right now, but I think it should be. But my number one take home is really to follow your local jurisdiction's rules. So, your government facility has decided what machinery they have, what kind of staffing they have, what kind of markets they have for selling that material. And so, they will have a list probably on their website, or maybe you might get it in the mail, that says exactly what they want. So follow that and don't wish cycle. So don't give them other things that you think should be recyclable. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's so confusing, and that's part of what you do so well, is that you kind of clear this up for all of us. So from the beginning of this interview, I'm sitting here thinking, well, boy, that's the most useless thing in the world, is recycling. And a friend of ours put a video up just this month of the guys coming by, picking up the recycling bin and just throwing the whole thing in the back of the garbage truck. And you wonder if you do it at all.
Mhm.
And then you mentioned the triangle with the numbers in it. There are numbers in that's how close I look. There are numbers in the, I thought if the triangle was there that it was recyclable, but what do the numbers mean?
So those are resin identification codes. And so there are numbers 1 through 6 are different types of plastic resins. And then number 7, it just means other. And so those resins, plastic is a bunch of different things, and different types of resins have capabilities. Like some can withstand heat better than others. Some are harder than others. And so the most expensive ones, or meaning what sells for the most money, what on the commodities market, what manufacturers want to buy, are number 1, number 2. So those are number 1 tend to be water bottles. Number 2 are things like plastic milk jugs and shampoo bottles. Those will sell for the most on the commodities market. According to my research, the milk jugs sell for about $1,000 a ton on the commodities market right now. And then kind of the other stuff are the other numbers. So number 3 through 7, those are really low value. Nobody really wants to buy them consistently. And so they sell for about negative $17 a ton. So that means that your recycling center is probably having to pay for those to go to landfill or incinerated. And so I try to have people look at recycling differently rather than just what you can put in your bin. My book really looks at, because that can, your jurisdiction might accept something slightly different, so follow your local rules. But I try to walk people through what happens next. So what happens next is once it's collected, is it sorted effectively into bales? And then are those bales, kind of like hay bales, are those going to be sold on the commodities market to a manufacturer who will turn it into something else? And so I try to walk people through that 3-step process to determine, is this really being recycled into a new product?
I'm looking on your list here. Like glass beer bottles have a yellow dot next to them. You would think that would be like the most recyclable of all.
Mm-hmm. Glass is great. And, I like it because you don't have to be concerned with kind of chemicals that are being added as liners and stuff, because glass is inert. But glass does have an issue in that it's super heavy and it breaks. So if you're recycling glass, you need to be near a glass recycling facility or bottler. And so there are some places that aren't close enough to bottlers to really make it make sense for the hauling. And so glass, I had to kind of invent a special category for it, just to kind of have that warning that there are some issues with glass, but generally glass is great.
And milk jugs are recyclable, but milk cartons are much more difficult.
Yeah, and so I have a special category for milk cartons as well, because people, I think, are at the store and they see a milk carton versus jug, and a lot of people think, oh, great, paper. I like paper. But unfortunately, that paper is lined on both sides with plastic. And some of it's even lined with a little bit of aluminum metal as well. And so that takes a lot more effort. There are only certain mills that will accept it to kind of pull those paper fibers out, and then the rest of it's plastic and kind of just gets washed away, and which isn't a very good thing. So a lot of jurisdictions accept cartons, but only the paper is going to actually be recycled, and not every mill wants them. But milk jugs, the plastic milk jugs, that's one of the really high value plastics. So, that's a little bit complicated one, but when I'm at the grocery store, I have all of these things happening in my head as far as making that calculation of, should I buy the aluminum beer bottle or beer can or the glass bottle, and should I buy the milk jug or the carton? So I just want to get some of those things across to other people so that they can think of that calculus as well.
Man, part of this conversation, Jenny, is starting to sound to me really similar to the one we had years ago about tobacco companies and, cigarette makers, to where, for a long time, the responsibility was, well, if you don't want cancer, you don't want to die, just don't smoke, to where they finally put like warnings on the packages. They made the cigarette manufacturers, pay up or take responsibility. It seems like with recycling and with pollution, that still too much of the responsibility is on the consumer, and the producers are still getting away with, I'm just destroying the planet.
Yeah, and only 9% of plastics ever produced have been recycled at this point. And that's not the consumer's fault. That's really with the manufacturers. And so, yeah, like you said, I think right now the manufacturers are getting away with a whole lot. They're kind of outsourcing all of that responsibility. But we're seeing laws now. There are state laws that are looking at various ways to regulate it. There's the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act at the federal level that I've been working on pretty closely, that really looks at plastic, the whole life cycle, but particularly looking at the stuff that's on store shelves. Because right now consumers really don't have many choices to get their food and their household products without having to get all that extra packaging with it. So I really want to see us move towards having the producers be responsible for that recycling and waste disposal costs, but also really transitioning to a system where we have access to real refill and reuse systems, and like not just shopping at a co-op when you can for your granola and things like that, but really being able to go to a store and without having to get all the packaging, being able to get your favorite shampoos and cereals and all of that, which a lot of people can't do right now.
Yeah, you'd think if the pressure was on, they'd come up maybe with some other kind of container materials. But if there's no incentive, that's never going to happen. You have some staggering statistics in the book about how much plastic junk and garbage is in the ocean now. Tell us some of those, Jenny. And are we already, just past the tipping point?
Yeah, so 11 million metric tons of plastic enter the ocean every year right now. And I'm an attorney with the Surfrider Foundation. That's my day job. And so I look at plastic pollution from the lens of ocean protection. So from protecting the ocean from having additional plastic pour into it. Because there's so many issues with that. Not only with sea turtles and albatross, things like that. Albatross will see plastic bottle caps floating on the top of the ocean and think that they're food, go and regurgitate them to their chicks. But also human health. So that all the pollutants that are in plastic, all those plasticizers really make their way up the food chain. So I really concentrate on trying to have less plastic enter the ocean rather than kind of the cleanup side. Although Surfrider does a lot of beach cleanups, but a lot of that is for public education to really let people know what's happening on our beaches. But we want to really concentrate on source reduction, on reducing how much plastic and packaging is out there in the first place.
Yeah, we've spent just a few minutes with you. First time we've ever met you, and I'm sitting here thinking, what's wrong with us, Jenny? Should it really be this difficult to do something that we all know we desperately need?
It shouldn't be, but I would say that there's a whole lot of power in lobbying in this country, and the chemical industry, the plastics industry, really have a stronghold in DC and in various state legislatures. So, this should be really easy, but I can tell you that it's been a fight. I've been working on even local plastic bag policy. I've been working on for 15 years. And there's so much really strategic pushback on that. And then talking about, moving beyond just talking about a single item to really talking about packaging more generally. There's a lot of pushback. But I really want people to think about recycling as a commodities market. So, it just makes sense that we'd want to use material that then will be resold and turned into something else. So we need to start off using higher value material in order to have recycling really work. And that doesn't mean that it'll cost very much for manufacturers. Usually the cost difference is very minimal, if anything. But just having that mindset that this material needs to be made into something else at the other end is something that we aren't doing yet in the US.
How tough is it, Jenny, to be you when these very powerful organizations see you coming? I mean, are you the enemy? And on the other hand, to see all this, to shout it out to the world, and then you have to wonder, gosh, is anybody even listening to me?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have small victories. So I moved to New York almost 9 years ago from San Francisco, and my goal was to pass a plastic bag law, and that happened in 2016. The city council passed a plastic bag law, and then a month later, the state legislature passed a law to overturn it. So, I see those victories and I see those failures, but I like being able to go to a restaurant and see that they're no longer using styrofoam or foam foodware, or go to a store and just kind of stand at the register and see customers bringing in their own reusable bags when I know they weren't doing that before. So I know that policy really inspires behavior change, and sometimes vice versa. But that makes me really feel like I'm doing something worthwhile. But there are definitely some days where it's a little harder to convince myself of that.
So, we know how the world works, and nobody knows more about this topic than you. How do you see this playing out? Is it going to take some kind of major crisis before we finally get our heads together and do something? Or do you have a little bit more optimism that maybe we'll be able to legislate this thing?
I am surprisingly optimistic. So I think that the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, at the federal level, if we can push that through, it has over 100 co-sponsors now, and we haven't had plastic reduction policy talked about in a real way at the federal level until last year. But I think if we see more states move forward, California and Washington and Vermont and quite a few states have really already been pushing forward with plastics laws, even New York. And if we see that, then I think that we have a real chance. But I think we do need people to care more about recycling and plastics policy. And I hope with my book that I get across that that this really does matter, and that our system isn't working how it should be working right now. And I hope the book gets eventually in the hands of legislators, so that we really will need to craft policy based on what's happening on the ground at local recycling facilities. And so once we start doing that, I think we really can make a difference.
Well, listen, we all should want to make a difference. We all should want to help you. I mean, listening to you it's fired us up over here. So what can we do to take responsibility? What can we do starting today that you think will help make a meaningful difference and help you in this fight?
I think there are two things that I talk about in my book. One is our personal solutions. So those are things like, I say, bring your own everything. So bring your own bag, bring your own water bottle, your own coffee cup, because unfortunately those aren't really recyclable. And then, that can also inspire other people to see that what you're doing, and maybe do that themselves as well. And then that kind of normalizes those behaviors, so that if there's some policy that's mentioned, people are more okay with it. And then this next step is policy. So, I'm a lawyer. I really think that policy is the answer that'll get us there a whole lot faster, to real solutions. So supporting policies when they come up in your local governments, calling your legislators and just letting them know, hey, I support single-use plastic reduction policies. I support fixing recycling, and making sure that those voices are heard, because your legislators hear a whole lot from lobbyists, and not enough from their constituents who really care about these issues.
Do you feel, Jenny, are you a lone wolf out there? I mean, I've never heard anybody talk like you or explain these things like you. I'm hoping there are a lot of you out there, but how do we find more Jennys?
Well, there are a lot. So I'm part of the Surfrider Foundation, is part of the Break Free from Plastic movement. And so we are a movement of over 1,000 organizations all over the world that are working on plastics reduction policy. And a lot of us are also talking about recycling as part of that. And so, that inspires me as well. really, at Surfrider Foundation, we have 82 chapters across the U.S. So local volunteers that are going to their city councils and talking about these sorts of things a lot of the time. But then the Break Free from Plastic movement really just has so many organizations and so many volunteer members who are working on these policies, who are on the ground. And so whole lot of work has been getting done. We just put out a map a couple months ago at Surfrider, where we're tracking over 1,000 local and state plastic reduction laws in the U.S. So there's a whole lot of movement happening. It's not just me, but I'm really happy to be one of the people at the forefront of this.
But we talk all the time about the importance in life of making a difference and feeling like you're doing something to contribute to the betterment of, your neighbors, your relatives, your friends, society in general. And Jenny, you're doing amazing work, and we were thrilled to be able to find you, and you're very gracious to allow this time to help fire up everybody out there who's growing bolder as well, because we all are responsible. We all are responsible, maybe not for causing the problem, but certainly for fixing it, because it's going to affect every single one of us and is already. So folks, if you're fired up and listening to this and you want to do your part to help, a good place to start is by picking up the book. And like I said, it really is. It's a beautiful book. It's easy to thumb through. It's easy to read. Everything in there relates to you, your neighborhood, your recycling process, everything that we do now. It's called Can I Recycle This? A Guide to Better Recycling. You'll find it wherever books are sold. Our thanks for fighting the good fight to Jenny Romer. Much luck, and I have a feeling we'll be hearing much from her in the future. Maybe we can help join her to help make some of this transition happen quicker than it would otherwise. That was excellent. It was informative. It was helpful, and it was important too. And don't forget, if you'd like to see more interviews like that, everything from big celebrities to ordinary people living extraordinary lives, they all live at growingbolder.com. Check it out and open yourself to a whole new world of hope, inspiration, and possibility. People like Jenny Romer are out there. You don't always hear about them. They're not getting the publicity they should. And some of them not necessarily on a national level, but some of them in your own community, in your own neighborhood, in your own area that would love an ally. There are all kinds of opportunities out there, and you know how much better life is, our society is, and our community is when we get involved. It's why you're here watching. We're all kind of searching for our tribe, so to speak, for like-minded people and ways that we can all be powerful, that we can all make a difference. And I want to thank you for finding us here and sticking with us. And don't forget to leave a comment. Let us know what you think of one of the most unique media organizations anywhere, of the recycling issue, of other issues that are important to you. Because when it comes to your life, you don't want to get older when you can start growing bolder. I'm Bill Schaefer. We'll see you right back here again soon.